thought while you're here, it would be great to get this opportunity to chat about sort of mental health with you, because you're someone that I was sort of quite inspired by before I started this podcast around mental health. And I think also something, one of the things that I think about mental health, I possibly use the term in a different way to other people, because I see it part of this very holistic ecosystem of like, it's not like one thing, it's connected to so many sort of different things in our lives. This idea of mental health, which I think is often sort of medicalized or separated out into something else, but I think it's part of a bigger whole. And I mean, one of the ideas that I was really drawn to that you talk a lot about is that the idea of sort of separation. And I was wondering if you could sort of elaborate on sort of, or have ideas on how that sort of the separation relates to sort of our sort of mental health in society. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it just seems like such a broad question that it'll invite me to make a very theoretical answer.
Well, how do you think we can tap it down into something less theoretical?
Yeah, so I'd say that for one thing, what is mental health?
Yeah.
Really, health means wholeness. And I think that might be a good entry point, because then we can ask, what is a whole human being? And I think a whole human being is someone with a full complement of relationships, from distant relationships to very intimate relationships. Most human beings who have lived on this planet had very intimate relationships with the people around them and the natural world around them. I remember reading, I think it must have been from David Abram, one of his books, but this account of traveling with an indigenous person on the land, and every single feature, every boulder, every hill, every stream had a story. It was woven into a tapestry of meaning that went back for many generations. So that's a kind of an intimacy, and to know what every plant is used for and the stories around that plant, and to know the habits of every animal and the way that that animal relates with human beings. So that's a kind of intimacy, a kind of relationship. And then also to know the people around you deeply, to know the people who grow your food and make your things, and to have these multidimensional relationships. Okay, so that would be a whole human being. And you can see how in modern society we have none of that. I realized I'm staying at my brother's farm for the summer. We go there in the summer, and so many beautiful bird songs, and I realized if I hear the bird song, there's probably not more than 5 or at most 10 birds where I can actually picture the bird. Most people would have been able to do that with hundreds of birds. So this whole world of nature, even I'm on a farm, I'm on land, but even so, it's alien to me. So I feel a bit alone. I don't have that sense of belonging in the world. And the same thing for social relationships. You go to the store, like, do you know that person? Maybe you do a little bit if you go to the same store every day, but you don't know them nearly as well as you did your neighbor in a peasant village in England in 1300. Like in that situation, you were intimate with so many people. So we have none of that, and I think that is a lack of wholeness, therefore a lack of health, that comes out as all kinds of anxiety and insecurity and neurosis. And then we're given a pill to cure it, or therapy, psychotherapy. There you are in a room with somebody, and maybe that actually does provide a little bit of intimacy. Someone gets to know your story really well, but it's not really what you need. So you could say that mental illness is built into society as we know it, and therefore to heal mental illness or to foster mental health is fundamentally a social, political, economic problem. It's not just how do we treat people better.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, one of the reasons I started doing this whole thing was because it was from my own sort of lived experience of depression and anxiety, that sort of thing. And I found that like my experience was very much that: go to the doctors, sort of GP, their sort of medicine or talking therapy, both of which I think they have a place, but like there's more to it. And I think, but I mean, I understand like that from the medical services are so overstretched. I mean, in the UK and in lots of other countries, so they can't do that. So I sort of wanted to explore more around what is the alternative thing. And I think I came across through listening to many different stories that it seems to be this big sort of spiritual crisis of sort of being lost and being churned out of a system and then not really knowing what to do with that.
Right. Yeah. Like when you say, these things have their place, talking about, I'm not sure if you're talking about psychiatric medication or talk therapy and stuff. If you take for granted the conditions that cause us to be miserable and insecure and anxious, if you take all that for granted as unchangeable, then you do need these things to keep society running. But a more revolutionary question is, do we need to take these things for granted? How can we change them collectively? And then there's also, how can I change them even just in my own life? Like, how can I create conditions where I feel more of a sense of belonging and stuff? And to some extent, that's impossible without changing the entire society. But to a large extent, it is possible to foster more intimate connection with people and nature. Like, there are things that we can do that have been shown, like even like garden therapy, like get people in the garden and a lot of the mental illness goes away. Get them into nature, get them into participation in some social project. And of course, if you're feeling really depressed, you probably don't even want to do that. So something has to intervene to bring you from that universe of despair and depression into a universe of participation and connection. And I think that a good first step for a sane mental health system would be to intervene by changing conditions rather than by giving pills that allow conditions to be maintained.
Yeah, I would agree with that entirely. I think another thing that I see, like a lot of the language, especially around sort of this idea of mental health, is about sort of combating, getting over, sort of, it's very sort of conflict-based language, I think, and something I think I'm becoming more aware of through my experiences and talking to others is that maybe it's not like a question of learning how to avoid all these things, but it's learning how to sort of lean into the experience and how to actually navigate that rather than see it as a problem, really. Like if you have depression, maybe it's a symptom of sort of the environment you're in, and how do you learn to listen to that and be with it rather than like I medicate it and hope it goes away, because I don't know if that's simple. But then like this, for me, like the question around sort of like rites of passage and like eldership always seems to spring up there. There's not really like in I think in Western society, I don't feel there's really that sort of support system, especially for young people when they're growing up, to have that. And like, I don't know, do you have any sort of ideas around that or sort of thoughts on that?
Most of the support structures are there to help you become a functioning member of society as it is. And if society as it is needs to change, and your purpose in this world is to help serve that change, then the support structures will not be your friend. And we need alternative support structures that understand that society has got an illness, and to adjust you to that is to make you ill too. And in that viewpoint, depression could be a symptom of health. It could be a symptom of the soul's rebellion because depression is a kind of a withdrawal from life, you know, and you just want to stay in your room and not do anything. You don't want to participate. So non-participation is a good thing. I mean, suppose, you know, we're in Nazi Germany and, you know, you got a job at the death camp, you know, and then you start feeling depressed, you know, it's like, man, I just don't want to go to work, you know. And then the psychiatrist comes and says, oh, the reason you don't want to go to work is that you're depressed. And here's some medicine to make you once again happy to go to work. Like, actually, your depression was healthy. And not that we live in such an extreme situation, but in a way, like, the normal functioning of society is bringing incredible suffering to humans and other beings. So I think that it is kind of healthy to not want to participate in the life that's offered to us. So I think that any approach to mental health that doesn't recognize that doesn't acknowledge that non-participation could be a good thing, and that sees health as being well adapted to the way things are, that's got a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably what my view as well, is that actually it just seems sometimes that the sanest thing to come out of this world is like it's being depressed. It's like it's seeing it, that's probably the wrong way of saying it, but like, yeah, sort of this thing they sort of class of sort of insanity is actually like a reflection of sanity in a world that is sort of not very conducive all the time to humans really being sort of able to flourish. And I think it's a really interesting area to explore.